All right, thanks for holding on. I think we'll go ahead and get everything started here on the webinar. My name is Kevin Hughes. I'm a Productivity Solutions Consultant here at DMSI. Along with me is Randy Klauser, one of our F9 experts that we have here. A lot of you have probably talked to him about F9 support issues and those types of things. And we have a three-part webinar series for F9, and this is the first one. It probably should be short, maybe around 30 minutes or so, depending on questions and where we go with the webinar. But really what we're trying to do is help our F9 customers get more out of the F9 product that they have. F9's made a lot of changes over the last year, and even over the last 5 to 10 years, they made a lot of other changes as well. So we really wanted to kind of showcase a lot of the ways that different customers use F9 and get you guys a lot more familiar with some of the new features here in F9 as well. This first webinar today is going to be, as it says, about basic best practices. So what we're going to do is go ahead and get started just on a couple different topics here. I'll go ahead and advance the PowerPoint here. And we do have the first part of that, which is one of the more important parts about F9, is the F9 Report Wizard. And that report wizard is a great way to create a very basic report within F9. A lot of our customers are going to use that to create the basic structure of their reports and really kind of give it a default functionality. So you can create a very basic financial report with this, and it will build the F9 formulas for you into the Excel spreadsheet, into that financial report. And it gives you all the correct references, whether it's an absolute reference, a relative cell reference. It'll build in a nice control cell section at the top of the page. And it does make that report standalone by itself, so it would not be related to any other reports or any other data. The report wizard would just bring that information in to that Excel financial report and just relate it to itself. It wouldn't have any other links or anything like that in the report there. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to another screen here. If you can bear with me for just a minute, we'll go ahead and do that and get it going with a basic financial report. But we are set up here with it's a spreadsheet, and we do have F9 installed here in Excel. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to create a new financial report. So what I've got here is just a basic F9 menu here with the financial reporter, and it shows all the different options and icons. The first one there is the report wizard, which I'm going to go ahead and click here at this point. Now it does bring up these options here. And it does tell us to go ahead and select the data. And Webinar 3 is our data source. Most of you are only going to have one set of data. We do a lot of F9 testing, so we have all sorts of different sample data points that we have here. If I go ahead and click next here, then I've got a list of accounts that I can go ahead and select from. And I can go ahead and build a basic list of accounts here on that. Go ahead and maybe select some cash accounts if I want, and then move those over here. Maybe throw a subtotal in there. Maybe I can select some other accounts if I want to put in different variance numbers or anything like that. Maybe I want to put in a blank line for formatting. There's all sorts of other information that I can put in there. So now we've got that all set up there. If I want to do a variance of the last two, there's all sorts of different things that I can do here to format a basic financial report. Again, I can change all these things later, but just when I'm doing this initial build through the report writer, there's different things that I can do here with subtotals and variances, and I'll show you how those formulas look here in just a minute. Now I can go next here, and now we can see that it does appear, and we have our periods. As it says here at the top, it has some helpful information on the report wizard that we're actually selecting the columns. This will say if we're going to say periods, departments, companies, and it also has a little picture over here, which is small and somewhat hard to read, but it does have this orange part of what is a little picture of a spreadsheet highlighted, which does tell us that we are doing this so we can go ahead and see the columns there. And we'll go ahead and make sure that we've got everything set here. Here, I'll make sure we have the screen maximized because we've got that report wizard here, and we have periods, and we can go ahead and start to select everything here. We've got the description part here that we can go ahead and select, and if we want, we can go ahead and select some periods. Maybe we want January, February, March, something like that. We want a subtotal of those three. Maybe we want April and May, just those two. We can move things back and forth and change them around, do those kinds of things that we want. We want a variance from April to May. There's all sorts of different things that we can program in here with blank lines and that type of information here as well. I'm going to go ahead and say this looks pretty good for my columns across. And I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And now we'll go ahead and verify, is this the company you want? We're using actual, not budget data for the year 2014. Home currency, all branch, all departments. We don't need to select any particular branch. We're going to use all branches, all departments or cost centers, however you have your accounts set up. It'll go ahead and change those. Now it asks, do you want to format this a certain way? And I'll just use this default here for F9. There's all sorts of different things we can do with color and classic and things like that. So I'll just leave the default, and I'll just go ahead and make the title there. And then we can go ahead, if we want to make a change, I'm going to go ahead and put this in a new spreadsheet, which is usually a good idea. I'm going to go ahead and click Finish here. And now we can see it did actually bring up a very basic financial report. We've got our control area here at the top. And if we look here at January, and we highlight that, it did actually build the GL formula, which is one of the basic formulas of F9. It brings in all three pieces of our account number here under the first part. It looks for this company, actual information this year, home currency, all branches, all departments, goes through all that information back to our F9 data mart, and it brings back the petty cash value for January of $44.21. And we can see that it does February. We can also see that it does March. If we take a look at this subtotal that we programmed in as part of the wizard as well, we can't see that it's just purely an Excel formula. It just takes the sum of those three columns and makes that a subtotal. So it does use Excel formulas there for that. I'm going to move over here just a little bit. We've got April and May, and again, that variance is also just purely an Excel formula of column M minus column N, just to go ahead and give us a variance of a negative $5.06 for April to May in petty cash. So we've really programmed a very basic financial report here using the wizard. Again, there's all sorts of different things that we can do with this, whether it's, inserting the text in there, blank lines, subtotals, totals. There's all sorts of different things that we can do with that. If we look over here, we have what is called the short description, or SDESC in F9 terms. That is actually information that's usually the short description that's coming from our GL that automatically populates here based on this report number, account number 1000, I'm sorry. So that account number 1000 and our short description in Agility shows petty cash. So that's what populates there in that particular field. There are some ways in F9 to override that. We can go through that in a later session if you'd like to take a look at the different ways if you want to change those descriptions or make those better or longer or different, or for ranges of accounts, have different descriptions. There's all sorts of different options on how we do it there. And one other thing I did want to point out is that after we went ahead and created this very basic report with the report wizard, we cannot go back into the wizard to make changes. What we have to do now is operate within Excel. If we want to change the subtotals or add or copy a column, we'll go back here in a little bit and take a look at that. But there is no way to redo the wizard or add on with the wizard. That is something we would have to do just with pure Excel functionality. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back into my PowerPoint here real fast and show you some more of the information there. And as we talked about the different ways to format a report, putting in blank lines, putting in subtotals, putting in section headings, all sorts of things like that. We talked about the short descriptions, and we talked about how Excel is how we're going to have to edit that financial report. And once we do get through the report wizard, we'll go through these here quickly in PowerPoint, then I can show you what they look like. There's a lot of different ways that we can modify the report to make it exactly what you need. Instead of just single accounts, we can have a range of particular accounts, or of branches, or of cost centers or departments for that matter. Or we can use the comma in between to have some specific accounts. We can combine any account segment into ranges or specifics or a combination of both, and we can take a quick look at that here as well. And we also have some different ways to edit the reports, to add new account numbers. We'll go back in and take a look at that formula, but it does use a lot of absolute values, especially for the control area of the company and the branch and the department. because it does that, we can copy it across, we can also copy it down. So we have a lot of different ways to easily explode that report very quickly to make a lot of different periods or a lot of different accounts and a lot of different sections and do those kind of things. And a lot of our other reports here that we can take a look at use the GL formula, which is the basic formula. And we also have one that uses an NGL formula, which really just reverses the sign on those particular accounts. That way, if it is a credit balance, it will have, is it a negative, Randy, that it has?
Correct.
Yeah, credit balances will have a negative and a debit would have a positive, and we can then reverse that going from a GL to an NGL formula. That way, we can make sure that it appears correctly instead of having a bunch of red values or a bunch of parentheses, negative values on a report. You can modify that formula just with a GL or an NGL to display the way you want on your financial reports. And we also have some things we'll go into here in a little bit as far as using an Excel sheet for control cells and naming some cells here as well. All right, so what I've done here is I have a similar report that I've already done, and this has a lot of different information, and I'm going to go to this P&L here to go ahead and get that started. So bear with me here for just 1 minute. Now we've got our P&L. You know, we happen to have our sales information here, and it's year-to-date May, and we have some other budget columns, some other things here as well. But we do have this formula, which happens to be an NGL formula, and we have cost of goods sold and all sorts of other information there as well. Now what I can do, if I want to go ahead and make a change to this account, I can go ahead and copy this and make another line if I want. You know, let's say I just want to copy this somewhere else, and I can insert it. If I wanted, I can go ahead and, you know, make that another account. And then I can hit the F9 key to recalculate, and it'll go back. And it looks like that's a separate sales account, 4010 instead of 4000. It doesn't happen to have any values in it, but it does show that we can copy those formulas down. We can also copy them across. We wanted to put different periods in the report. There's a lot of different ways that we can do that as well. Or if I wanted to, and just make it all one line, I'm going to go ahead and just work backwards here for just a minute and undo some of those changes that I made. Maybe I want to just add those all into one line. I can do 4,000, then I can do a comma 4010. That gives me only accounts 4,000 and 4010. And again, it is pointing over to all branches and all departments still, but it's just the accounts are what I've added on. That'll give me those two individual accounts. Or if I like, I can get the range of accounts, if I can type correctly, sorry about that, just by putting two periods in there. So if I do 4,000, then 2 periods 4010, and I hit F9 to recalculate, that'll actually give me the same values as I had before because it gives me every account from 4,000 to 4010. It goes back to my database every time and says, show me anything on there. Go ahead and take a look at that and verify exactly if you have any other accounts that you may add in the future. We have a lot of customers who try to future-proof their reports there by adding in a range of accounts. Let's say I have these internal yard costs. Looks like they're all my 5100 accounts. You know, I could just as well have one line for 5100 through 5199 if I wanted to. So we can certainly go ahead and, you know, if we want to list all those out separately like we have here, that's fine. Or if I just want to go ahead and change that to 5100, 5199 like that, and then hit F9 to recalculate. I can hit the right button there. We'll go ahead and recalculate the whole sheet, and then it'll go ahead and say these are your internal yard costs as a grand total with all those accounts. So there's some different ways that we have to format that information. Go ahead and type that in correctly here. We usually like to lead with an apostrophe before to show F9 that that's a text field. The main reason we do that is because of leading zeros. If you had a leading zero on your account number, maybe it was 0110 or something like that, if we don't put that apostrophe in there, it's just going to default to a 3-character field that's going to error out when we do that. So that's what we recommend is putting that apostrophe in. Even if it is like this, it's a 4-digit number. It'll work the same either way, but it's a good habit to get into just in case we want to get that done. Go ahead and change this back here. And one quick thing that we can take a look at here too is I've got this report and I've got my GL formulas, I've got my NGL formulas. You know, if I wanted, I could just do 5100 to 5105 and then a comma and then do 5120. So like we looked at before, we can combine those two-dot ranges. We can also put specific accounts in. We can really get as extravagant as we want as far as how we put those accounts in there and how we name that going forward there into F9. I'm going to go ahead and Go ahead and change that back there. And we've also, as you can see, this particular P&L sheet, we don't have that control area at the top anymore. And if you look at my GL formula here, I have a lot of words in there instead of absolute references. I only have a couple of references. I have one here for the period, which is year-to-date May, and I have one for that main account branch, 4,000. Everything else, I've actually named cells. You know, I have a name cell here for branch, for department, and what I've done, I'll go ahead and hit escape out of here, is I put all those on a control data sheet. So if I look at this, this is the company information here, and I've named the cell over here, COMP. You know, if I go to any cell in Excel, and I go ahead and see here G2, and maybe I want to put a value in there, test 11, and I want to go ahead and name that cell, I can go over here to where it says G2, and I can just type over that. If I say test 11 and hit enter, what I can do now is anywhere I want, if I want to do equals, I can do test 11. It even comes up as an option for me if I just want to click on that. Now I can say, okay, this always equals that cell. So if I change the value in that cell, and then I recalculate the spreadsheet, it automatically changes to whatever this cell is. That way, we don't have to worry about an absolute value and going back and forth across another tab. You know, if I want to try and do something else, if I want to go ahead and equal this, and maybe make it equal to this particular value, you know, we can see that formula as a mess. It's got an equal sign, I've got an absolute value going to that tab with an exclamation point, and then I point to one particular cell. There's no absolute values on the cell number or the cell row or column, so if I move that cell, it might not keep working. There's a lot of things there that are probably going to cause me, because I'm not the smartest person in the world, to go ahead and add errors in my formulas down the road. But if I do a named cell, it doesn't matter. As long as I have that named, I can reference that anywhere in my spreadsheet, and I won't have any issues referencing that down the road or getting back to it in the future. So we always recommend if somebody's doing a report or simplifying a report to go with those named cells. And I've actually made this one pretty easy because I kept that nice little blue area, and I put in yellow the ones that I want to change every month. You know, we're always going to use my Webinar 3 data. I'm usually going to use actual versus budget information, but I've named both of those, the type ACT and a type BUD, in case I do reference that like I do in my P&L there. I have this year versus last year, which is automatic. It'll just take one off of this year, rightfully so. I've got branch, and I've got DEPT for department. That way I've got May. So if we take a quick look here, my balance sheet is for May 2014 for the period May. My P&L statement is year-to-date May versus year-to-date budget. The title says May 2014. If I go in here and select a different period, let's say April or something like that, and then I go ahead and click F9 to recalculate. F9 by default recalculates everything that Excel thinks it needs to recalculate. Sometimes that's going to get it done for us, and sometimes that's not. Looks like this time with the balance sheet, it did change it to April 2014 and changed our period there to April, and it does have some different values. On the P&L, it did also change our title, and I have all of these pointing back to that one cell. So here's year-to-date April budget, and we see we do have some different values in here as well. That way we can make a change once in one particular place, whether it's a year, whether it's a branch that we want to go to in particular, a department or cost center, or however you have your account numbers broken out. We can make this change in one place, right here if we want. I can type over it, or I can select from this drop-down. And then I can hit F9 to recalculate that. And then we can see it's done, and it did update our balance sheet and our P&L statement to be for May 2014. So that's a really nice way to hopefully shortcut and make those updates faster on a monthly basis, or if you're balancing and going back and forth at the end of a period, something like that. It makes it very easy for us to run that multiple times and quickly check changes in different periods and make sure that we're on the same page there. There's a lot of different ways that we can check for report accuracy, and I'm going to jump back here to the PowerPoint and go through that. And I do see a couple of questions that come through on the chat function. I would encourage you to use that for your questions. We should have some time at the end to go ahead and answer some of those, so feel free to go ahead and put those through there. And I will go ahead and stay on a little bit after the webinar and probably chat back some answers if it's something that we can take offline instead of going through here through the presentation today. So I would encourage you to use that chat function for your questions there. And I'll go ahead and get back to my spreadsheet here again, using that worksheet for the control cells, naming those cells, for formulas and titles like I did. All of the entire spreadsheet changed based on that one particular cell that I changed from April to May. and I could have changed the year or anything else like that as well. And some of the other functions that we have here, and we'll go through these real quickly in F9. We've got an analyze feature that F9 has. We have some Excel formulas that we can do to verify reports are in balance. I know Randy talks a lot to customers about that, and that's one of those things we recommend just as a double check. It doesn't have to be in the printable area of the report, obviously, but just something so you can verify that your balance sheet appears the way you want and your P&L is balancing to the correct numbers on the balance sheet, so you can eliminate that if you do have some issues with balancing or with your report data. There's some other ways we can look at with drill down and listing out information. In zero suppress, we have a lot of rows in this particular report that are all zeros all the way across. Some people like to see those, some people don't. Maybe the bank doesn't need to see those if you're going to prepare a report for the bank, so you can zero suppress, and F9 has a function to do that automatically as well. And it also can undo that if you need to for the bank or for your internal use to make sure that everything else is valid and appears as it needs to. And we do have some other options on the recalculation. And the one I want to point out here is instead of just regular F9, which is asking Excel to assume that it knows what to recalculate, it might look back and see what's changed or see what formula dependencies there are and a bunch of other things that Excel does in the background to make sure I'm going to recalculate these particular cells. I'm not going to do everything because that might take too much time. If we want to force Excel to do everything, we can do, as it says there, Control-Alt-Shift F9. And that will force every single cell to recalculate in dependency order to make sure that we have the correct data on every single tab of our Excel worksheet. So it'll look at every single one, it'll recalculate everything in control data, everything in my balance sheet, everything in P&L, everything in any other tab I have open in Excel, just to make sure that we have the correct data there. A lot of times that's going to solve an issue that we have. Perhaps we aren't getting the right values or something isn't updating if we hit F9. If we do hit Control-Alt-Shift F9 and we still have incorrect data, then we can eliminate the recalculation as an issue. There's a couple other ways that we can recalculate also. Instead of just Control-Alt-Shift F9, if we just take the last part of that and just do Shift F9, that'll just recalculate the tab that we are on. And I can show you how that looks here real quick, so bear with me for just 1 minute. Right now I'm on the P&L here. And if I just want to recalculate this one particular cell, I can just highlight it and then click Enter, and it will recalculate just that one cell, and that's usually pretty immediate. If I do Shift F9, if we look down here at the bottom where there's an empty space now, it'll look really quick. It'll say calculating and done because it just did this particular tab. If I do the F9 key, again, it goes pretty fast and calculates just for maybe a second and does everything. If I do Control-Alt-Shift F9, it takes a little bit more time, but it does go through and calculate the entire spreadsheet, every single cell, just to make sure that we have all the correct values there. And of course, nothing changed in this particular example, but that's a great way to troubleshoot if we're having issues with balancing something like that. That Control-Alt-Shift F9 is a nice way to do it. If you're like some of our customers and you have a huge report with 10, 20, 30, 50 tabs, and it takes a long time to recalculate, using Shift F9 or just going to one cell, clicking Enter is a nice way just to make some changes as you go. As you know, we are in manual calculation mode here in F9, so if I do copy something down, something like that, it's not going to recalculate. It just copies everything down and shows it just as we look here. Until I hit the F9 key, then it does go through, calculate, and it brings back all those values as it looks. So you're going to see some odd values there, but a lot of times you can look here in the bottom left, and it might say calculate, so you can hit F9 to recalculate and see if your values change to what you expect. Some of the other ways that we can look at here very quickly to make sure that we have everything correct, we do have our balance sheet here, which is a pretty simple balance sheet, but we want to make sure that that's correct. So as I scroll back and forth, we've got some check over here, some check formulas that we made in red. This happens to be the balance sheet versus the P&L line to make sure that those are in balance. And we have the assets, making sure we equal the liabilities and equity here as well to make sure that our balance sheet itself balances. If we go over here and we happen to make a quick change, something like that, we recalculate that whole sheet, go back over to that balance sheet. Now you can see this is out of balance. We've got a $300.32 issue, and this formula shows us that. So now we can go back to that P&L. We can copy the F9 formula down, recalculate to bring in that value, and it happens to be $332. and now we can see that it did go back to 0. So we can always double check and make sure. A lot of our customers might make that a conditional formatting, so it appears red only if it's a value other than 0, or there's something to say check formulas with exclamation points or something like that. Just something to draw your attention to the fact that we may have an issue that's going to come up, and we might want to double check our P&L or our balance sheet to make sure that everything's in line there. One other nice thing we can do here, I'm going to go back to the P&L. If we go to our F9 menu, we do have a lot of different functions. We'll get into just a couple of those. One of those is called the Analyze function. Go ahead and move a couple quick windows here. And the Analyze function here happens to default to the basic data that we have. We're going to look at what accounts we are using. And for this one, I'm just going to look at the current sheet. I think that'll be all right. I'm going to go ahead and click the Analyze Now button. And what this does is it looks and says, hey, here's the sheet we're looking at, and here's what we've got. We do not use these particular accounts. Looks like 1,000 to 1,350 we don't use. We don't use that 4010 account. And here's some more of those 1,000 to 1,350 accounts listed for different branches, different departments. And the one really nice thing it does here at the bottom, it tells us how many times we use each account. If you'll remember, we had a regular year-to-date May and a year-to-date May budget for each of those, so it does use each of those accounts twice. And we see all the way down, it does show twice for all those accounts. So that's a good thing that all of those are a 2, all those are the same. So let's go back and make some changes. Maybe we want to make sure we use that 4010 account. It does put it on a different sheet here, so it doesn't affect our sheet here. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe just add that 4010 into this particular one here. And I'm going to go ahead and mess something up on purpose. And I'm going to go ahead and include 5010 on this as well, even though it is already below it. I'm going to hit the F9 key. Again, F9 recalculates whatever Excel thinks it needs to recalculate. Control-Alt-Shift F9 recalculates every cell. Even if Excel knows that I didn't make any changes other than these two things, it's going to go recalculate everything if I do Control-Alt-Shift F9. If I hit F9, it might just calculate what I've changed since the last time I calculated. Control-Alt-Shift F9 is going to force recalculation of every single cell on every single tab in this entire worksheet that's open. So now I made some changes. I included that 4010, and I doubled up on 5010. I'm going to go over here and look for accounts used on this sheet again and click Analyze. And now we can see we only have the ones not in use, 1,000 to 1,350, those balance sheet accounts it looks like for different branches, departments. And now we've got it, here's what it uses, here's a bunch of 2s, but then all of a sudden we have 5010 and we use that 4 times. So we can then verify if we've got something that's off in our report. Well, it looks like we doubled up on this particular account, so that might be probably the amount of whatever we're off, hopefully from a balancing standpoint. So this is a quick and easy way to see what you've got in your report, what you're using or not using, just to verify exactly that you have the report you want and everything is in line. This, along with our check formulas, are a really good way to figure out what's happening there. A couple other quick changes. If I want to go to this P&L, I'm going to go ahead and let's say I've got this particular line that's a 0. I've got a lot of 0 lines here. I'm going to go ahead and 0 suppress that. So maybe I'll go ahead and select this tab. I've got a 0 suppress here option. I can do all rows, columns. I'll just do rows. So now what it did, as we can see, is it got rid of all those rows. It didn't delete them. You can see row 10 still is there. It's just hidden. So it's kind of an auto-hide function that works along with Excel. And I can go ahead and make it so it looks pretty here, so I like that. Maybe I want to double check and make sure that something isn't there anymore. So I can actually go to 0 suppress and I can undo that. And I can bring that back if I can select everything here first. I can undo 0 suppress. So really that just unhides all of these and brings those zeros back. So we can go ahead and do that back and forth and make sure that we know exactly what's happening there. And we've got some other information here that we want to look at. Maybe I can take a look at this particular sales number at $5.5 million. And maybe I'm lucky enough that I don't think that's right. That sales number doesn't look right to me. I can do some additional analysis just on that particular number. If I go ahead and highlight that cell, I'm going to go ahead and get out of my Analyze function. I don't do that anymore. And I'm going to go up here to the drill down function. And now what we've got is it has some other information here, and it defaults. It's looking at actual 2014. It's looking at this particular 2 accounts. It's looking, I can drill by branch, or I can drill by whole account. We don't bring transactions into our copies of F9. I'm just going to leave this at branch. and go ahead and click drill down, and we can see I've got 3 branches. It looks like it has a credit balance there. And then I've got 1 branch that is reversed, and it is a very small amount. So something's going on in branch 40. Maybe that's supposed to be zeroed out. Maybe it's supposed to be a lot larger credit balance. There's something going on there that I probably need to investigate. So now I've isolated that on the F9 side. I know it's branch 40. I can even get down to the whole account side if I want to say it's actually branch 40, department 25, account 4000 is exactly where my issue is. So now, at this point, it's time to go back into Agility and look at that exact account, run a trial balance, whatever else you need to do to figure out what's going on with that account and why that amount doesn't look correct. Maybe it is and it just doesn't look right to us, but this is one other way that F9 can give us additional information so we can see exactly what we need to do there in Agility. So the drill down function is one that's underutilized across a lot of our customers. And we always encourage it because it's a great way to see some basic detail without going in and running a huge report in Agility or listing every single account. You can drill down to exactly what you want. I can change this on the fly if I want. Maybe I just want to look at account 4000, not mess up my periods there. And I can just look at whole account for that, and it just shows these 4s for account 4000. So there's a lot of different ways we can use this as we go. We can copy these 4 values over. If we want to copy those and paste them and look at them somewhere else, we can do that right from here as well. So again, I would recommend to use the drill down. It's that icon right up there at the top of that menu bar there in F9. I would strongly encourage you guys to use that. Another one of these that is a useful one is the F9 lists. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Again, it verifies the data. Mine happens to default to periods, which is one of the more useful ones that I like to use. Maybe if you have a lot of account segments or a lot of different budgets or a lot of companies that you use, you can list all those out as well. I'm going to go ahead and list periods, and I'm going to go ahead and send it over to the clipboard, and it tells me that it was sent to the clipboard. Let's say I'm going to go over here and maybe I'm going to just make a new tab for this here in particular. I can go ahead and paste this in, and this actually gives us just about every single way that we can put a period into Excel that F9 will recognize. It starts with the month name. We have this month and last month options as well, so we want to change those in F9 each time. I like doing it the control theta route so I know exactly what I'm looking at there, but some of our customers use this month and last month. If we use month numbers instead of names, we have that period 13 for some of our customers that use that. The change in a month for certain accounts, last year, those months, this quarter, this month, year to date, budget, actual information, number of months ago, year to date, quarter, budget, all sorts of year-to-date changes, all sorts of different ways, as you can see. We don't use those open ones down at the bottom. All sorts of different ways to use periods, in fact, over 100 of them. You know, this doesn't even include, if I just type in the first 3 characters for January, J-A-N, F9 will recognize that and also know that, oh, I know you're looking for January. So there's all sorts of different ways that we can put those periods into a report. If you want to format it one way on the header and have it look a different way for F9 purposes, you can do that too. So there's a lot of different flexibility and functionality that we can have there, depending on what you want to look at there in F9. But really, I think that's a lot of the basics around F9 and the information we talked about recalculating, whether we use F9, which is the default that most people do, which is the Excel defaults for recalculating, Control-Alt-Shift F9, to go ahead and force the recalculation of everything there. We have Shift F9, which will just give us that one particular tab if we want to go ahead and calculate that. And we also have just an F2 or a select and an enter like this. If I just want to calculate this one cell, I can just select it, go into that formula, hit enter, and it just recalculated that one cell all by itself. So hopefully that's a helpful way to look at that there. And I wanted to remind you, again, we do have a few more minutes that we could certainly stay online, so I would recommend that you guys chat your questions in there with WebEx. If you have any other questions, you can certainly chat those in and we can answer those. And we will have some other sessions here coming up over the next few weeks with some other advanced features here in the next one, which is a week from today at 1:30 Central Time. We're going to talk about some of the different ways you can get information from F9 with charting. And we're going to get Randy Cosler, budgeting expert, to talk to us more about some of the budgeting options, budget versus actual reporting, the budget write-back function in F9, which is a great way. You can chart some information out of F9, modify that, write back your own budget, and then have that budget versus actual reporting. There's all sorts of different ways to change those budgets on the fly or change those as you go. So there's all sorts of good information we can go through in that session. We'll also do a quick recap of some of the basic information, and hopefully if there are questions since then, we can certainly answer that as we go as well. And then also on the 9th of September at 10:30 in the morning Central Time, we'll get through the new features that are exclusively in F9 version 5. And we have F9 scheduled tasks is a big one in there, and some different ways we can use that. In addition to emailing and sharing reports, there's some ways to do that with the tasks that are built into F9. There's even some ways to schedule the exports out of Agility if that's something you want to do. Schedule the import into F9 if that's something you want to do as well. We can talk about the pros and cons of that during that session. And also we can highlight the user security, which is even just in the recent version 5 features that have just come out here in the last probably 3 or 4 months, as far as role-based security and how to secure functions by user and map different accounts and make it so only certain users can see the values of certain accounts or certain branches or departments or something like that. Well, it looks like we have answered all the questions here, I see. So again, I appreciate you guys coming out and for being a customer of ours. And if you have any other questions, you can reach out to Randy or myself, and hopefully we'll see you guys all at the advanced feature session next week. Make sure you tell your friends because it is free of charge, and we appreciate you attending today. Thanks a lot.